The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the participants and do not reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
BronxNet. Your voice, your views, your vision.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. We're in the political season and there is plenty to talk about. We can talk about some of the races, the incumbents and challengers, and tonight's guests have written extensively about the Board of Elections and numerous other Bronx political issues. Please join me in welcoming the editor of the award-winning Riverdale Press, Kappstatter. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Gary.
And the paper's lead political writer, it's Adam Wisniewski. Adam, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having
me.
me.
Good evening. And on the telephone, live from across the Bronx somewhere, it's the editor of the Bronx Times Reporter, and that is Bob Kappstatter. Cappy, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Is he there? I guess we lost him, but we'll get him back later. Anyway, let's talk to you folks who are good enough to be here with us in the studio. Here's the scorecard. Efrain Gonzalez went to jail. Pedro Espada went to jail, is going to jail. Larry Seabrook is going to jail. The newspapers are rife with allegations of scandal involving Naomi Rivera. My question, and we'll start with you, Kate, do Bronx voters care? Do these kinds of things resonate with Bronx voters so they say, never again, I'm not going through this? Or is this really not an issue and it's really more gossip? So what do you think?
I do think Bronx voters care. I think that they don't always have the best choices at their disposal. There aren't a lot of great challengers that come up against these guys often, and they're allowed by whether it's the local Democratic clubs or county to sort of stay in office and do all sorts of disservice.
Well, what do you hear, Adam, from Bronx voters? And just in terms of, are they satisfied? Are they dissatisfied? And I guess my implication is, because we know it's almost knee-jerk that incumbents get reelected. What do you hear?
I think it depends on the area. I think there's a lot of people that are definitely happy with their elected officials, but, you know, in certain areas there's guys that have been in office for a long time and they're not even facing challengers. And that's just a reality in a lot of the state, actually. But in the Bronx, it seems like there's a lot of political families that have there's a lot of name recognition in a lot of people, and some people will go out there and just vote for that name, and that's a hard thing to go up against, especially.
You covered extensively the Pedro Espada trial. Was there anything in there that you were like, oh my goodness, or was it all pretty well documented and basically as the trial itself played out, it was like, well, okay, we knew this was going to happen.
It was hard to be surprised anymore with Pedro. I mean, after a while, even some things that came up that I didn't really realize during the trial about him paying for his campaign office with money that was, brought about in illegal ways, it wasn't that surprising. We've heard it all with Pedro, and he's in the news all the time, and he never surprises me.
I guess the most surprising thing to me, and then we heard very similar things with Larry Seabrook, is I had heard these things. We had talked about these kinds of things on this show for years and years. I guess to me the surprising thing is there was such a large volume of it, and it just took so much to finally bring it to light. Bob Kappstatter, you're with us now? Is Cappy with us?
I'm back.
There we go. Okay. Nice to have you, Cappy. Let's talk about a similar line of questioning when it comes to Naomi Rivera. You and I gab on the phone about Bronx politics all the time. Is it your expectation that she is simply going to win again? Will what has been in the front pages of the newspapers going to resonate with voters? Or really, as your colleague said here in the studio, you know what, name recognition is pretty strong and, she's just going to waltz right in?
Well, one thing you have to remember, in a lot of these local elections, you have a very small voter turnout. I mean, I think the prediction is going to be about 4,000 or so voters. So organization is major in these kind of elections. So if you have certain senior centers, if you have unions involved, getting out people, she could swing it. Again, now Mark Jonai is a member of the Taxi and Limousine Commission. Who knows that he won't have taxis lined up outside the senior centers on election day.
But as viewers will find out next week, because we're going to do the debate, there is not one challenger, there are three challengers, and this, of course, would work potentially into the incumbent's favor.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I wrote in my column, you're going to see the Latino voters who are anti-Naomi. I almost said Snooki. I'm allowed to say it.
Because you're the one who coined it, yes.
We're going to look and see two other candidates with Hispanic names, and they might go there, which drain the votes from Mark Jonai.
Let me just ask you about her support, and then we'll come back to our folks here in the studio. The borough president came out, and as I understand from people on the inside, is campaigning and using his resources very heavily to campaign for her. Carl Hastie is, putting all his chips in that corner. Why is this so important to them when, in this case, it's possible they will be backing somebody who, regardless of how it turns out, is going to be investigated and on the front page of the tabloids very heavily?
Well, that's interesting.
What's their stake?
I saw Ruben at another fundraiser Friday, and he said he was out doing door knocks with Naomi, and she was supposedly getting a positive reception. And I said, look, if you want to run for public advocate, if she winds up indicted, you're going to have some mud on your shoes when you go citywide as a good government candidate.
Is it because of her father and Roberto Ramirez that's running her campaign that is bringing out the best of Ruben Diaz and Carl Hastie?
Well, there's a lot of interlocking relationships in this whole thing, but I mean, generally the rule is you support an incumbent no matter how bad they may be. But I also think this tarnishes the party's reputation, and Carl has been doing a pretty good job of cleaning up the last dregs. We'll
see what happens here. Let me bring it back to my guests in the studio. You folks have done a lot of work on the Board of Elections themselves. I don't know which of you is best to talk about what happened in the Rangel-Espaillat race. Kate, is that something you want to? Why don't you tell me about what happened there, or tell voters what happened there, and where are we at now? Was anything cleaned up after that whole thing was discovered that the votes might not have been counted properly, et cetera, et cetera?
Right. Well, I think the answer is we don't know if anything's been cleaned up, but it doesn't seem that way. The Board of Elections went before the City Council and basically said they'd done a good job, and what happened on election night was that a number of election districts came up with 0 votes, even though votes had clearly been cast in those election districts. The votes were since counted, and there was an accurate tally about 2 weeks later, but what's unclear is what actually went wrong and whether or not that will happen again. And Adam can probably speak to, there was another election where the results were, it was a landslide. It was Elliot Engel's race. Yeah. But
it was a much less competitive race. It was Engel versus Aniello Grimaldi. And they had a major screw-up. In North Riverdale, there was an election district that had unanimously voted for Grimaldi over Engel, who's been in office for 2 decades almost. And it was 31 votes. Only 31 votes towards Grimaldi, but they should have gone to Engel. And it turns out
they literally had the wrong candidate.
They had the wrong candidate listed on the ballot because they misprinted them like a week or 2 earlier, and then so they had to go back and scrap all those and reprint them all with Engel's name first and Grimaldi's second. And I guess this one ED got the wrong ballot. So people were voting for Engel and scanning it as Engel, but it was coming up as Grimaldi. So we talked to people that live there that said, I voted for Engel, but they didn't. They voted for Grimaldi.
You had investigated that, and as both of you had reported over the past couple of weeks about the Board of Elections. There's nothing new. There's no way to say, gee whiz, now we've got this squared away. There's no accountability.
We've been grilling the Board of Elections. We ask them on a weekly basis to tell us what they're doing with this specific thing in the 16th with Engel, and they don't respond. They don't get back to us.
And not encouraging about the democratic process.
They haven't acknowledged that there's a problem.
Yeah, they haven't even said there was a problem.
Now, last week you reported that the gentleman running against Gustavo Rivera had not filed his campaign expenses and all those kinds of things. How is this possible in this day and age at this time that any candidate, incumbent or not, is somehow negligent and not caught on it and thrown off the ballot or
You can look back at Pedro Espada. He didn't do this a lot as well. He didn't file campaign disclosure reports, and then he would after the election, and they may not have been complete, and if no one wants to take him to task on it, he gets away with it. And that's the way it goes.
Bob Kappstatter, let's talk about challengers. We were talking in the studio beforehand, and I'm going to relate a story, and I think you know it because I told you about it, that I had talked to a guy named Richard Soto, who is running against Nelson Castro, and had invited him, in fact, could have been tonight to debate, and he told me he was going to be in Virginia tonight, and therefore was unable to come in and debate. This would make it the second straight time that the challenger to Nelson Castro has declined an invitation to come on BronxTalk and use a half hour of time. My question is, are we getting challengers who are really capable of, number one, defeating incumbents and really capable of being quality legislators? And maybe that's why voters aren't going, against incumbents, because who would vote for a guy who's in Virginia 2 weeks before the election?
You want my long answer?
No.
Well, that's my answer. No, you're not getting them.
No, why don't we have...
You're not particularly getting quality. You're getting guys who are like to play politics, maybe like to see their name in ink or something. But in past few years, I really haven't seen any really strong challengers who I think deserve to be in Albany.
Gustavo Rivera would be one, whether you think he deserves it or not. He is in Albany, and he was a challenger to an incumbent.
Well, in Gustavo's case, obviously, yes. But some of these minor challengers, actually, incumbents like to have these minor challenges because that gives them the excuse to hold fundraisers and put some money in the kitty.
Right. We got a bunch of phone calls. Bronx politics inspires all, I guess, except for voters. It is Bob from the Committee of 100 Democrats. He wears a lot of different hats when he calls in. Hi, Bob. Nice to have you. How are you?
Gary, how are you?
Good.
And I'm going to say it's from the Bronx News, a real newspaper like the Bronx Times.
Right, but not the Riverdale Press.
It's lost half its circulation since the previous owner sold it. And said that it only covered the 81st Assembly District, Gary.
Bob, do you have a question, or you wanted to just make that little dig?
On the subject of Richard Soto, Gary,
yes.
I did an expose on him 2 years ago, if you read the column. This time, you guys are ignoring the 78th Assembly District because Jose Rivera seems to have a home in Elmont, Long Island that I'm told he lives in, which would be much similar to Pedro Espada.
Okay.
And I still want to know, Kate, if you still print emails sent to you that are sent to all outlets filled with inaccuracies, lie, and false statements that you turn into letters to the editor. Or do you want to apologize
Bob,
to me now?
We probably don't have enough time to get to that. Do you know to what he's referring?
I don't know what he's referring to, but I will say that we try to print all letters to the editor.
Whether you agree with him
whether
or
we
disagree.
agree with the
Okay, Bob,
If they're
can you...
false
writer or not.
and contain inaccuracies.
Well, people may write things, I guess. So.
They're not
Do you
checked
wanna-
out, Gary. Well,
All
I'll
right,
talk
do you
to
want to
some other
respond
time.
to that?
Like, come on.
Not
All right.
particularly.
Bob, anything else you wanted to mention? I guess not. Dennis, did you want to respond?
Oh, no.
There were 8 different topics in there, and I was trying to follow them. I didn't get them all. Dennis from Morris Park joins us. Hello, Dennis. How are you? Do we have Dennis? Folks? Help me here, Jane. Are we moving on?
Bonds, with
I'm sorry. Dennis, would you start again? I didn't hear you.
Okay, they had a block party on Allenton and Bond
Yes?
with Naomi yesterday.
Okay.
And I didn't understand that. I think I'm very defensive with the Mark Jonite organization.
Lower your TV, sir, if you
people
will.
from the public, where we live in the area, and they pointed us out. They didn't want us there.
Well, but I could understand if they're having a block party that's a campaign block party. I could understand they wouldn't want the challenger there. Is that unreasonable?
But and they're making the public pay for hamburgers, hot dogs, and ices.
Wait. Turn down the volume on your on your TV. Push the mute button. Thank you. The point is, you're saying now that they had a block party and they were charging for hot dogs and hamburgers, and that you didn't like.
Yeah, I guess they needed to. They needed money for maybe
to pay for the hot dogs
get
and
indicted. Maybe we need bail money.
Dennis, thank you very much. John from Westchester Square. It's an interesting group of phone calls tonight. Go ahead, John. Do we have John from Westchester Square?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
I actually have a question, but I would also like to preface that with a comment. As somebody who spends a lot of time and money supporting things that are going on in the community, it really disheartens me to read about these things and to see them in the press on a regular basis. If it's not today or tomorrow, it's next month or the month after.
What things are you referring to?
I'm talking about the bottom line here. The bottom line here, and what seems to be across the board, is that they're all taking money and funneling them through their own not-for-profits or for not-for-profits that are giving them an ability to do things that they shouldn't be doing. And yet we have every elected official in the Bronx supporting this. And I ask you, and this is my question, can we not surmise from this that the reason that everybody is supporting somebody who once again is being accused of funneling money through a not-profit and stealing taxpayer money, can we not make the assumption that they're all doing it and that's why they support the guilty?
Say that again. Can we not make the assumption that they're all doing it?
That they're all doing the same thing.
Oh, what you're saying is that you're suggesting that it's happening all over, so that's why people would, in other words, we were talking about the borough president and others supporting this candidate, and you're saying they would support her because it's commonplace.
You would think that in the face of the politicians who came before, Larry Seabrook being most recent, and that the people that supported him would kind of get it and say, you know what, we should maybe sit it out when it comes to something like this. But instead of doing that, they stick to it, and they go out there and they support. Ruben Diaz is going door to door with Naomi Rivera. What's the reason for that?
Well, this is, I asked that question. The borough president's going to be here September 17th. I will ask him that question directly. It'll be after the primary. But Ricky Martinez, who's running in the 78th Assembly District, is calling in. Ricky, how are you? Nice to have you on the show.
How you doing, Gary?
I'm doing fine. How can we address your concerns or answer your questions?
I had a block party on Saturday. I have free entertainment and I have free food for the community.
Okay. Did you call just to make that announcement?
No, but also, I don't consider myself a mediocre candidate. I'm a fighter for the community, and I believe that this is not a monarchy where we could pass the crown. I believe that we earned it when we should fight for that seat.
Let me ask you a question. It's 9:18. Why aren't you out knocking on doors instead of watching television?
As a matter of fact, I was on King's Patrol giving out my flyers, knocking on doors and getting to know people. Gary.
All right. That's what we want to know. Ricky, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, first of all, I want to say one more thing, Gary.
Sure. Go ahead. Did they lose it?
Okay.
Yes,
I'm
go ahead.
fighting for issues that I believe. And I believe that, it's time for Jose to retire and settle down.
I'm sure you believe that because you're running against it.
Table and give back to the community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
I want to talk about process, and we're going to let Bob Kappstatter weigh in on one, and our two guests in the studio weigh in on the other. Let's start with you, Cappy. Let's talk about the fact that Larry Seabrook now is leaving an open seat, and there are allegedly a number of people who are lining up, getting ready to would like to run for that seat. Yet the Bronx County Democratic Committee has already selected its candidate. Talk to me, why did they select Andy King, and what is that process about?
Well, they almost didn't. There was there's some stuff that was in Andy's background that made them a little uncomfortable, but I think they settled that issue. I think probably he's organized enough to bring the biggest turnout for them, and I'm not sure what their discussions were with him.
Just from a Democratic point of view, and I want to ask the folks in here the same thing, shouldn't there be just an interview process, some other engagement of all the people before you just say, well, this is a buddy of ours, this is a guy we know?
Oh, sure. That's been done in the past. When Roberto Ramirez was county chairman, you'd come in, you'd sit down with him, and he'd say, what do you got to bring to the party? Put it on the table.
There is going to be an open. There's going to be an open seat in Oliver Capel's seat. How do you see will there be a process of some sort? How do you see this playing out?
You're talking.
No, I'm talking to Kate Pastor in the studio.
I think that it all depends largely on what Jeffrey Dinowitz decides to do.
Okay.
If
he's the kingmaker in that part of the
he very well may run for that seat, and in that case, he will sort of decide where he decides to go. Will decide where others feel that they can go. Again, the sort of the sense that you have to do what a leader says is appropriate.
Do you think Adam? You cover him as closely as anybody. Do you think he wants to be a city council member?
I really don't know.
And not drive to Albany anymore?
Ask him that all the time. I don't know. He gets a raise. He gets a shorter commute, but
he's term limited, and then he'll have to come up with something after 8 years. Well, presumably 8, but you never know.
Right. So. Yeah, I don't know. There's a downside to both.
Are there other candidates out there, and is this... I'm just concerned about the process. I'm talking about access to the ballot, and I'm talking about changing things up. Are there other candidates out there you think that could qualify and that will get some attention?
Well, Cliff Stanton is the only, I guess,
announced
candidate.
Right.
Bob Press has talked about running, actually.
Okay.
That's a rumor, I guess, but, he's talked about it. I think if whatever Dinowitz decides to do, the other seat, so if he vacates the assembly seat or if he takes city council, there's a few names. Dan Paternak has been thrown around, Andy Cohen, both committee board 8 members. I don't know. It's too early to tell. It's pretty far away, but.
And so you concur with what Kate said, that the process is going to be what Jeff Dinowitz, who leads the Ben Franklin Club, they decide.
So you mean Ben Franklin Club, or you mean the county committee as far as the process?
Either way, I'm just want to know what's the process going to be.
I really don't know what the process is. I mean, I wonder if Cliff Stanton will go in front of the Ben Franklin Club and ask for their endorsement.
I assume he will.
He might, but they're the only
Bob Kappstatter, we've got an email that we're going to read from a viewer, but do you want to place your bets now and tell me who's going to win various races in the Bronx? Or?
Well, first of all, I think Jeff Dinowitz is just loving it. He's walking around with that Cheshire Cat grin. He's being a big tease about this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm sorry, what's your next question?
The question was, are you going to do a little horse racing for us and place your bets and tell us who do you think what's going to happen on September 13th?
Louis Sepulveda beats Danny Figueroa in the new 87th, covering Parkchester, Castle Hill.
And the 80th, are you willing to venture a guess?
No. I'm leaning toward Naomi winning at this point, unless Mark Jonai can really, at this late date, get his campaign together.
Any other challengers you foresee defeating incumbents?
Not really at this point. I'm not sensing any strong
you want to weigh in anything out there? Any predictions? No predictions.
Not going to do it.
Not going to do it.
Any challengers has an uphill battle, is all I'll say.
I do want to encourage everybody who's interested in Bronx leadership to read the columns that are written in the Riverdale Press to certainly read the Bronx Times and certainly even read Bob Press's column in the Bronx News and all the other political writing, because one of the issues I think that's out there is in the Bronx making sure that we get enough coverage and that elected officials are reviewed properly and that the elections get enough coverage. We do our part, I can tell you that. Folks, I have an email that I do want to read, which came in, and then maybe I'll ask a quick go-around of the guests on the show. This came in from Ryan G., who wrote in about the Kingsbridge Armory. Let's put it up on the screen so folks can read along with it. Ryan G. said, I support the idea of the Kingsbridge National Ice Center. This plan would create a truly unique world-class facility, bringing international recognition, visitors, business, and jobs. Furthermore, it would involve youth and Bronx residents through educational community space programs. An excellent plan. And so that, thank you very much for Ryan G. Did you like what you heard the other night, or the other day? We were out there watching the press conference. What'd you think?
They definitely made a very compelling pitch.
But you're still hesitant.
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna favor one of the two final projects over the other, but it definitely seemed like it would bring a lot of interesting components to the area and to the Bronx.
You think it's doable? You think we can get enough kids out there and enough people out there in 9 ice skating rinks with enough equipment to make it work?
Look, I don't know in terms of filling that capacity, but I think the idea that Bronx kids won't skate, that certainly
doesn't fly. You think they could be convinced?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the thing, the Ed Snyder program in Philly seems to have worked. Where inner city kids are playing hockey, they're ice skating. So, and I think it's interesting that it took a year of debate and battle to get one ice skating rink in Van Cortlandt Park, and now down the road there's going to be 9.
This took 35 years to get it.
That's true, I guess.
And we haven't seen one in Van Cortlandt
Although
Park
it seems like it's a new issue that ice skating rink will be in.
Will the ice skating rink be built in Van Cortlandt Park?
Yes.
Even now?
Definitely.
Bob Kappstatter, your thoughts when you heard, gee whiz, maybe there'll be 9 ice skating rinks at the Kingsbridge Armory?
I think this proposal is building like a snowball at the top of the hill. Politicians, city. I'm curious if the EDC goes with the other proposal.
Wouldn't that be interesting? That would be a slap in the face. Anyway, Bob Kappstatter from the Bronx Times, thank you. Kate Pastor and Adam Wisniewski from the Riverdale Press, thank you.
Thanks for
And
having
folks, if you want to offer questions or comments based on anything you heard on tonight's show or anything going on in the Bronx, just like Ryan G. did, then email them to us at bronxtalk@hotmail.com, and we'll read those on the air during a future edition of our program. Archives of Bronx Talk are available at bronxnet.org. You click Bronx Talk on the right-hand navigation bar. Also, please become a fan of Bronx Talk on Facebook. Next week, we'll have a special edition of Bronx Talk to present the long-awaited debate for the Democratic primary in the 80th AD. That will be on Tuesday night, September 4th. It will air at 9 p.m. Invited candidates are the 4 of them: Naomi Rivera, Mark Jonai, Irene Rukaj, and Adam Bermudez. They will square off. It's a show a lot of people have been anticipating, and we will have it for you 9 o'clock Tuesday, not Monday, Tuesday, because Monday night is the holiday. Okay, you got it? Tuesday night at 9 o'clock. The gorgeous new set that's behind us was custom designed for Bronx Talk by BronxNet's Gene Elton, based on an original mural by artist Daniel Halban. Thanks to producer Jane Folloro, director Michael Arias, our cast of thousands who are around us here in the studio and up in the booth. And to you, good night.